have recorded. We're recording now. So yeah, so we are here today to talk about the fourth of the seasons of planting, the season of discipling today. But before we get into that, wanting to have some opportunity to talk about where you're at over the last week since we last met and talked about gathering. And I gave you that list of questions in the email, which you can answer in any way that you want. But let me just put these back up on the screen real quick. What have you worked on since we last met? What will critical mass look like for your strategy? What teams do you think you'll need? Or at least, people, sometimes you just need the right person to fill the right role, but you recognize that it is a kind of work that maybe they're gifted for. And what teams will you need? And how is your core team coming together? If you already have one, or if you haven't formed it yet, how's it going in terms of the covenant that you have with them, or what are you thinking in terms of a covenant to invite them to? Anybody can share.
So I'll jump in because it's probably going to be the shortest one. I had a really crazy week last week and didn't get a whole lot of work done. So, the questions I can answer, critical mass, my estimation would be probably about 20 at the minimum. And as we're sitting here, it's like I haven't even thought about asking somebody who's crafty to have somebody to, even if they're not leading the craft, come up with craft ideas. Yeah, it is part of this adventure type plan that I've been brewing up. And still working on having conversations to build a core team and just define the vision even more. So that's where I'm at.
What do you think is the next step? And by that I mean, just incremental step to putting together your team. Do you have some people in mind, or is that a next step even just to make a list of possible people?
I think making the list is my next step.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, good. Okay. Anybody else? Where are you at, everybody?
I can jump in. I saw the questions, thought about them, reflected on them, and we have a really good Christian education team already at Sydney UMC that developed. We have an area team that we call Salted, Sydney Area Leadership Team Ecumenical Disciples. I got a good chuckle with our lectionary reading Sunday with Salt and Light.
Yeah.
So kind of where I would connect, Dave, with what you said about, or was it Ann or Dave talking about Debbie Earth Trial? What we have going on with the teams isn't just a singular thing. It's sort of a kind of a percolation, to use the near third sacrament of coffee. And what I would say is that, and doing a lot of the SLI stuff, what I like about what Aaron Bowen says is you put guardrails in, but you still need room for the spirit. So that the Methodist mindset is, how do we package this, produce it, and ship it out? So I think we want to have a plan in place. But one of the proclivities is we're going to put every facet of this in place, which is exactly what institutional Christianity is. And then another thought is we're going to create a framework and allow the Spirit to do something with this. And maybe if Ann's ministry changes in a radical new positive direction that nobody saw, maybe that's a good thing. You know what I mean? So what's come out of the area team so far is Unadilla UMC is doing VBS once a month.
Yeah.
We are doing a coffee house next month. So it seems like a lot of these things that we've been working on for a long time are just starting to fire together. But we have a meeting next Saturday, the 18th. Unadilla UMC, first and third Saturday of the month, has this ministry called Breakfast in the Basement. So we're going to go towards the end of it. We're going to meet, and I'm going to introduce them to this idea and allow this to develop. So kind of where I'm at, it's sort of like a tiered approach. We have a ministry action plan. We have a covenant, and there's some baby maps, in development. So it's sort of like moving pieces are coming together. And if this could become kind of a thing in that, I think that would be great, because what we're already seeing is with the monthly VBS at Unadilla, and I've never even been to it because I don't need to, because I'm just helping to lead it. But some people have started to come to Unadilla UMC, some kids and families as a result. So mine's a little different in that it involves not just Sydney, but a bunch of other churches. So I guess that's the best way I can describe it. Because if I tried to implement that here right now in a central sense, I think it would be a challenge with all of our other ministries. But you might remember, Dave, maybe you do Claudia Jenkins, who's at Unadilla Center UMC. So she's doing a VBS from February 20th to 24th. So part of being more integrated, we have some people at Sydney that are going to be helping with that. So sort of this cross-pollination from people from different churches, and then watching the Holy Spirit move and the excitement. So it's I guess that's the best answer I can give you right now. So.
Well, it sounds like you're in the middle of a process. You're in a covenant with the people from all the different churches, and you're in a process, and you're kind of waiting on the Spirit to continue to percolate and kind of new things to emerge without you driving them. It sounds like it's probably very inspiring to the people from the other churches to hear what's happening at Unadilla, right?
Absolutely. And just the positive impact on these churches. I mean, Pastor George Gallendorm, who's a retired pastor, goes here. He was excited to come in on Sunday because he preached at Unadilla Center, and they brought 2 new members in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's sort of this, I think that if the ministry we're talking about was just at Sydney, I would still be outwardly focused, but the base of operations would be Sydney UMC, and that is my appointed base of operations. But God has given me a more expansive vision, which I did not ask for, Dave. I was very happy to come here and just serve Sydney UMC. I did not ask for an expansive vision. So,
right.
But that's what's going on.
It's the time we're in right now with the lack of clergy, right? And
luckily, Anne's not retiring, because that would just be devastating. That would be terrible. So. You're right, though.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Paul.
That's all exciting. I guess we started with a vision of modeling the loving relationship with Jesus that's available to kids, and having a burden on our heart that there's too many kids that don't know him. So there's about 7 of us that are on fire to bring it into the school, and we have developed a good relationship with the school over the past few years. I've been in there before. My grandson graduated from there, which could have been a detriment because he was a hellion, but anyways. So we have met and found out that from one of the people on my team is a 3rd grade teacher in the school, and who knew that boondoggle was back? So that's one of the crafts that we're going to be offering, and as well as Play-Doh and beads, and the snacks that were suggested are all gluten-free. There's a ton of them. So there's 7 of us willing to shop and put together all of the things that go into making it happen. I took 200 registration forms to the school yesterday and got an email or a text from the 3rd grade teacher that they showed up in her mailbox. So these will go home with the kids today, and they're supposed to come back by the 17th when they go on vacation. We have a room secured in the school, and couple of men in the church are willing to haul all the stuff that is required. So that's where we're at. We're excited, and the excitement is spilled over into our elderly congregation, and yeah, so it's good. Oh, can I show them the lips?
Yeah, I love
Found out from the school nurse, told us that they were low on chapstick. The kids have been asking for it this winter. So I ordered, well, they've already donated some chapstick, but I ordered, these are peppermint, and I got labels that have they say friends at SSUMC, Sulphur Springs UMC, got our address. And then I'm going to put them in this little bag that says from your lips to God's ear. So that'll be something they can take home. So yeah, we're excited. We're excited.
love that.
Yeah, boondoggle never went away thanks to camp.
It never did it? Yes.
Nope.
This fusing of the beads with an iron, that's a new thing for me. So I guess I'm out of touch with that craft. But anything we can do to have small groups around the table and discuss the Bible story that we just had, yeah.
Great.
Feed them, tell them a story, sing a song, and then let them talk about it. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like a great plan, and it's very exciting. And we hope that I think you're starting it after Launchpad is done, or around that
Yeah.
time, right? We're having our last gathering, and so please keep us posted so we know how to pray and we can celebrate with you and things like that. So
the last time we did it 3 or 4 years ago, there were a few teachers, a couple of very popular teachers who were atheists, and they give us a little bit of a hard time, and they kind of look down their noses at us, but the kids were so excited they just kind of ignored that. So which was great. I mean, Satan loves that, doesn't he? To have somebody disagree with what we're teaching. But my hope is that if this goes well, our sister church here in Adams will want to do something like this. There's a sportsplex down the street from the church that is full on Sunday, and they have no kids in Sunday school, so I'm thinking, why not have Sunday school at the sportsplex,
yeah.
So we'll practice on this one and maybe move over to Adams after.
Well, that's an exciting thought. And
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for sharing and for keeping the process going forward. Again, the goal is always just to take the next faithful step, just to keep things moving forward. And God's timing is often different than ours. So go ahead, Paul.
Well, what I was going to say is, since I've had the awesome benefit of working with Aaron Bowens and co-leading with Pastor Bob Clark from Chenango Bridge, I can hand this to the team and just say, what do you think of this? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's the cool thing is they're already in that mode. I mean, I say selling and explaining. I'll have to do some of that, but I think when you're, getting an engine going that hasn't been started in a while, there's a lot of priming, a lot of cord pulling. So, if that's where you feel like you're at, Brett, I mean, once you get over that hump and people can see, what's possible, and they can see what God's doing, and they have a level of excitement. That's really the game changer. So once that happens, like the whole scenario in my experience moves forward to the extent that people are then more agreeable. To them, it's not just another, Methodist program or video or something. So that's the challenge. So the cool thing is, when I tell them about this, they're going to listen right away now, what they think of it. But if it was a year and a half ago, they'd be like, well, what is this, from the conference? The bishop wants us to do this? What, because they're going to close our church? I mean, so once you get past all the nuts, then it seems to be a little easier in my experience.
Yeah, you've taken the time to build the L3 is all about relationships first, right? And that's what you've done. So that's great. All right, well, I'm going to move us again. Our work is focused on the season of discipling. And just a reminder again, we're kind of getting to the higher levels of this slide, but we're continuing to discern as we, and continuing to cast vision. And our vision is probably shifting as we talk with people, as Paul, shares these ideas that he's learning in Launchpad with the folks on his team. They will hear and they will help him shape a vision for their, situation there in the Sydney area. And as he gathers, new people that maybe become excited about starting something new, the discernment and the visioning will continue to be shaped. And today we're talking about, kind of having an idea about how we're going to move people from not knowing God's grace to having an experience of God's grace to actually committing themselves to following Jesus with us. That's what we mean by discipling, is that process. And having some kind of an idea or a plan for that in our mind ahead of time is what today's about. So a couple of key thoughts up front. The only reason that we plant new faith communities is to live out our purpose, which is, making disciples, which for me, what that means is giving, the language I use is giving people an experience of God's love and grace so that they can respond and say yes to following Jesus in the world. That's what I mean by making a disciple. We can't make anybody do anything, can we? All we can do is invite them into God's presence and give them an experience of, hopefully, of God's grace so that they respond in a way that is really just between them and the Spirit. But it's our opportunity to put them in that place where that can happen. So we always keep the main thing, and always keep that in mind. A second key thought is that you need to have a plan for how to do it. I think this is true, the second statement. The main reason churches are dying in our culture is that we have been making pew sitters and not disciples of Jesus. I think that we have been really good of attracting people to come to our church. And in the past, in America, for a long, long time, it was the thing to do, to go to church and to say, oh, yes, I have a church and I have a pastor, and to do my hour for the week and then go home and feel like I've done my God thing. I think, I'm not saying there aren't disciples in our churches, but I think the vast, maybe you want to argue with me, the vast majority of people in our churches over the last 50 years have been really pew sitters. I remember there was a couple that came to church every Sunday in one of the churches I was serving. I think it was Sydney, Paul. And every Sunday, maybe they're still there at the end of the service, they were just religious about coming. Every single Sunday, the guy would shake my hand after the service and say, see you next week, Pastor. This was a couple that never did anything else. They just came Sunday morning and they were faithful, and you're grateful for faithful people like that. But, when given an opportunity to kind of understand their spiritual gifts or be part of a group that was trying to grow in their faith or to be involved with any kind of a mission project or anything. They just always said no, always said no. And, somehow I think we have a lot of people like that in our churches. Many of them would never even say, see you next week, because they go week to week and see if they get a better offer. But I believe that it really is important that we think about how we inviting people to know Jesus. So one of the things we talk about is having a pathway. And all we mean by a pathway is that we have in mind, and everybody in the church kind of understands there's kind of a next step for people. So if they find their way into the church one way or the other, they hear and they understand, okay, if I want to go deeper in my faith, what's the next step I should take? We just have to have a next step in mind to invite people to. And so raise your hand if you've read the book Simple Church. So it's not necessarily the greatest book in the world, and I certainly don't agree with all the theology in it, but the idea of it is really powerful, that it helps to actually have a simple plan that everybody can know, easily can understand it and know it, and that it becomes the core of everything you do. And I think there's a lot of existing churches that do not have a clear pathway. And so this idea of planting a new faith community is a good thing, because it gives us a chance to really think through and have a plan for our new faith community. This is, if you read the book Simple Church, this is basically the simple process pathway that book talks about. It talks about on the left-hand side, there's an arrow coming down, and the first of the circles is their worship service. So basically, Simple Church says, disciple-making churches do three things. They worship, that's the first circle on the left. They do small groups, that's the circle in the middle, and they serve some mission or ministry, that's the circle on the right-hand side. And there's this movement, these arrows, right? So the Simple Church book talks about the primary doorway into the church is worship on Sunday morning. So that's what we invite people to. And then once they get in the door on Sunday morning, we invite them to small groups. And once they're in small groups, we invite them to serve, to discover their spiritual gifts and serve in one way or the other. That's kind of the Simple Church model. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the best part about it is that it's simple and that it's easily known and remembered. What we're discovering, though, is, and this is something we've learned from church planters, is a more missional way of thinking about the church, is to recognize that there's actually multiple doorways into a church. And so it's not just Sunday morning. You can see the only thing I've added to this drawing is two more arrows, right? And it recognizes that actually small groups is a very safe doorway into the church for some people, because they're, it's all about relationships, right? And if I've never been to church, or it's been 30 years and the last time I was in church, I had a horrible experience, it's much safer for me to walk into my friend's house, somebody I meet at work, and they've become great friends over the last 2 years, and they keep inviting me to come to their small group on Tuesday night. In some ways, it's easier for me to show up with 10 people in the room than 100, right? And so the doorways into a small group are actually simpler for some people. The other thing that new churches have been teaching us for the last 10 or 15 years is how many people in our culture actually show up at a new church at a service event. And that's what that last arrow is, that it's recognizing there's a doorway for some people when they have a chance to serve, especially young people, young adults in our culture who want to have an impact in the community. And they don't think the church has anything to offer them until they show up at an event where they're actually helping people alongside church people. and they realize, wow, these church people are pretty great and they're doing some wonderful things in this community. And at the end of a service opportunity, they turn to the people from the church and they say, what else are you guys doing? And that's a doorway for them, is service. So these are all good things to keep in mind as you think through your disciple making pathway. These are some other things. This is a long list. This seems like it's not simple, but to me, as we're thinking about inviting new people into a relationship with Christ, these are all little micro steps that I think it's helpful we think about. Do we have a plan for meeting and building relationships with new people? If that's the only thing, if there's one thing I could get every existing church to spend time on, this one would be it. Because we have been basically in this attractional mode for so long. Like Paul said, we wait for people to come to us on Sunday mornings, right? And the only way we meet new people is if some person from the outside of our church gets the courage to walk in the door on Sunday morning. That's our only plan for meeting new people. And it's just not working anymore. So I think, your new faith community, it's really important. Jenny's figured this out already. She's got her foot in the door at the school. She's got a way to offer an invitation to every single kid that's going to go home to their parents. Hopefully the kids will carry them home to their parents, right, Jenny? Parents will actually see these invitations, and they're going to be the kids are invited to come to do something fun after school to meet a need. So there's a plan for meeting and building relationships with new kids that doesn't involve those parents getting up on Sunday morning and bringing the kids into the church building, right? There's a plan for that. And that's what we need, as a plan. Now, once you meet those new people, you have to have a plan for inviting them. So just having a relationship is not enough. You've got to equip your people to know how to invite folks to come and be part of it. You also need clarity about all doorways. So this last slide, I talked about multiple doorways, right? Avenues for people to come into the church. I think you need to have clarity about this. So I did this Launchpad, this session with a group of Hispanic church planters about 4 or 5 years ago in our conference. I think there were 4 of them there. And one of the pastors took this slide so seriously, they went back to their leadership team at their church in Syracuse, Casa de Dios, and they made a list of all their doorways, all the ways that new people were coming into their church, and they came up with 11. I was blown away by this. They realized that they were meeting new people and new people were coming to them through 11 different pathways. And they actually paid attention to all 11, and they created ways for people to experience hospitality in all 11 pathways. Casa de Dios is actually one of the fastest growing churches in upstate New York these days. They're bursting at the seams right now. And I think this is one of the reasons why they've really paid attention to this. Once you have those things in mind, then also a plan for helping people to understand what it means to follow Jesus. And in that, I should add the phrase to give them an example or an experience of God's grace in the middle of that. And then actually a plan for inviting people to say yes. It's kind of like the old altar call. It kind of feels that way, right? But I don't think we give people that opportunity enough. Just to say, yes, you've experienced God's grace today through Holy Communion. How are you responding to that grace? How will you say yes to following Jesus this week? I think it's a good thing to do every single time we're together with people. Okay, so real quickly, because all of these don't necessarily apply to you and your ministry with children, but you might have a regular worship opportunity. And you can certainly redefine what worship looks like. Maybe it's 3 minutes with kids. Maybe it's something very simple and very brief. There's small group opportunities. There's service opportunities for people. there's always a plan for next steps. So Jenny, what are you going to do if a mother comes to you one week after school program and says, our kids are really enjoying this, and we're wondering what else? Is there anything else that you're offering for kids or that we could come to as a family? Do you have that in mind so you know what a next step is for them?
Well, the obvious answer is we have Sunday school every Sunday, but also the group has been wondering if we should continue this. Have a break after the 5-week period and see. Well, I shouldn't say see how it goes, because if God says you got to continue, then we'll continue, and have it be a permanent thing in the school. Yep.
Yeah, good.
That's the possibility.
Right.
And with other players too, we would like to recruit others to participate.
Yeah.
Because we're all elderly.
Yeah.
We'd like to mentor, but yeah, that would be the next step. And also, I do an online Bible study on Thursdays. That would be something to invite her to. We're starting a Lenten Bible study. There's a lot of things going on.
There you go. Good.
But
Good.
then just the one-on-one relationship would be. I still have moms from 10 years ago that I watch their kids grow up and pray for them. So, yep.
Beautiful. So there's always those invitations for people to kind of take the next step, right? Whatever that might be. And there's opportunities for people to commit to ministry. So one of the things, Jenny, you might think about is if there's a mom that's like that and expressing, maybe the next step for them might be become part of the team, right? That you could equip them to become part of the team, and they could be part of the serving, bringing the ministry to others.
That's a possibility too. Within the Safe Sanctuary, she can be a guest, a visitor in the school. And of course there will be 5 of us that are Safe Sanctuary, qualified, and she can help with the snacks, she can help with the craft, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. And maybe be trained down the road, right? To become part of it. Yeah. These are some other things to think about. Again, part of discipleship is giving generously. I think another part of discipleship for people, and it's something to think about, is how can you help somebody who is new to the faith learn their own spiritual gifts and discover, what's the next step for them to become part of the team, like we were just talking about. And then I think it's really helpful to have a visual representation of the pathway. And again, it can be very, very simple. A pathway that people in your church follow to grow in discipleship that's easily remembered and visible. And your new faith community's vision statement might actually summarize your pathway. There's some churches that this is what they've done. They've kept it very simple, and they have a visual way of describing it. And so here's some examples of some good ones. I always bring up John Martin's church foundation that he planted in Vestal, because he has mastered the idea of simple. From the very beginning, he has said to people, at Foundation, we do 3 things. We worship God, we do small groups, and we do a monthly mission project together as a congregation. So those are the 3 things. The things that John has done is he's recognized that all of these, the little green arrows, are doorways and pathways. And he's also recognized that there isn't just one-way movement, that people sometimes come into the church through, a service opportunity on the right-hand side, but then they actually discover small groups and worship because they've been there. So there's this movement, for new people and any direction. The coffee with the pastor thing is something that he does after people have been coming to worship for a while, about once every other month. He offers coffee with a pastor after worship. And it's a chance for him to pretty much orient people to the church and give them an opportunity to commit to foundation. That's what Coffee with a Pastor. It's about a 1-hour meeting. And it is the invitation that he gives to make sure people understand all the different small groups that are going on and how they can plug in. Because for him, membership means that you're in a small group. And he makes that very clear in that meeting, that you don't become a member without being in a small group also, because he recognizes that's where discipleship probably really happens. So that's John. This is, again, this will be familiar to Ann, because Ann has been in Launchpad a couple of times with Bill Valet co-teaching. And this comes out of the Fresh Start Church in Elmira, that is a church that Bill was a pastor of for over 20 years, that was a church with 4 different locations and had like 6 different services during the week. And all the people in all those locations followed this same disciple-making pathway, which is very planned out. And you can see that this is like laid out like a baseball diamond, and that first base is 101, second base 201, third base 301. And those are actual 5 to 6 week classes that people take. There's a cycle of 4 different classes, and this is their disciple making plan. And everybody in the church knows, okay, I've taken 101, but I haven't taken 201 yet. So next quarter, when there's another cycle, that'll be the next thing I take. And people actually, I've preached in this church a couple of times, and people actually talk to each other and say, oh, what have you taken so far? Oh, I'm moving on to 301 this next time. Everybody knows where they are on the pathway. And the interesting thing they do is that by the time they've taken 401 the next time around, so you could do that in a couple of years, you could do all 4 of those classes. And the last one is around, mission and ministry, and sharing Christ is the idea that you actually begin to think about, how can I share my faith with other people and invite new people to be part of the church and to know Christ. The next time around, people actually help to lead and teach the next class, so that, becoming a leader in that church involves, not just going around this, but also going around the second time and co-teaching new people these concepts. So that's a very specific disciple-making pathway that Fresh Start has been following for many years, and they are a vibrant church. This is just an image, again, having a visual representation of your disciple-making pathway. This is a church that I visited a number of years ago. It's probably the most ethnically diverse church in all of Ohio. It's in downtown Cleveland, and they have just a remarkably vibrant church. And this is up on their wall, this image, and it's on their website. And I can't explain to you all of these steps, but it's a very visual thing. And people see, okay, there's these opportunities I have to grow in my faith and be part of a prayer team. I can take the Bible 101 class. I can, the Connect is the kind of the first step to connecting to the church. Discoveries about your spiritual gifts. And then the team part is about becoming part of a team to serve. So that's the disciple-making pathway at our Garfield Memorial. And this is a representation of one of the churches, Centerpoint, in our conference. Ann has worked closely with Wayne Clemens, and this comes out of Centerpoint Church, where Wayne is the pastor. And it is literally the next step, literally stair steps. They took that quite literally. And you can see the steps. And people, again, this is a big poster in various places in their building, and people can know kind of what the next step is for them if they want to go deeper in their faith. So all of that is to say that I think it's good to have a plan. And these two, this one and this one, don't seem real simple, do they? But they are thought through, and they really are designed to help somebody who's new to the faith to not only experience God's grace, but also begin to really grow in their faith and go deeper in terms of their understanding of God's love and healing and forgiveness. And then to be able to discover their spiritual gifts, and then to actually serve. There's this movement you can see in this one. It goes from worship to growing to then serving and then sharing your faith. There's this movement in these that I think is pretty clear. Love, grow, serve, and share are the 4 keywords at Centerpoint. So, okay. So I think it's hard. Let's see what time we got here. It's 9:30. Let's take a 3-minute break. Let's take it 5. Take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll look some more at the season of discipling. Sweetheart.
Gotta get one more. Stay there. Stay, I'll be right back. Come back. That's not for you. That's right. Stay.
How'd it go, baby?
Good. All done. So that's good, right? Oh, good Lord.
My wife just came in and kissed me, and I said, "Oh, that's going to be on the recording." She's just horrified now.
Well, just a demonstration of love. That's part of the process, right?
That's exactly right.
Huh.
Very few people are going to watch this, Les, so we hope anyway.
Well, can you back it up and erase that part?
No.
I was thinking, Pastor Dave, about the growing part. A lot of people have resistance to that, and I think sometimes I've seen the service a mission. If they can do something, then they'll grow that way. We volunteered at Aldersgate for a few years, and my husband would go out into the community with a team from Western New York State, and they would help people repair their homes. The churches would tell, it was a whole group of teenagers and their pastor, and they would go into people's homes. And there's one woman in particular had a lot. Her ceiling was falling down. She had so they were in there. The team was in there, and her son came and said, "What's going on? What are you doing to my mother?" He was very suspicious of their presence, and they showed him and they told him what they were up to, and he stood with his arms folded and watched as they really made a difference. How much is this going to cost her? Well, it's nothing. So that was so by the end of the week, he had brought his drill and his paintbrush, and he was in the process. And if you do this next year, I want to be involved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's a doorway into faith for him, right?
I would hope so. I think that's a lot of people that are skeptical of religiosity, that you're going to accuse them of being sinners and not worthy of our presence.
Yeah.
It is scary to go into a church. Even those of us that are comfortable in the faith and going to churches, it's hard. It's hard to go into a new place. Yeah.
I think one thing that is good too is we should have fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, remember the church lady, Dana Carville? I mean, holy moly, there's a fine line between a sermon and a hostage situation. You know, I mean, heaven forbid we laugh and have some joy in church. Yeah. My goodness. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like our ecumenical men's lunch on Thursday, we say grace, and then as I say in church, everything goes downhill from there. You know, we don't have a parliamentarian. We don't take minutes. We don't second. We don't, because we're there to fellowship. And I had a I had a call real quick because I had to silence my screen. There was a man in Afton. He came to our men's lunch a couple of times. His name is John Schnell. Maybe he was around when you were here, Dave. But he died in a fire last
Oh.
week. And Dave, you might remember a woman named Diane Hendy, but it was one of her relatives. So
Oh,
this guy called and said, this guy came to our lunch a couple times. Can we do something for the family? You know what I mean? You know, I'm also the chaplain of the fire department. I'm not a very good firefighter. Brett's probably much better than me, but the Apostle Paul said, I've become all things to all people that I might win some to Christ. So I'm in the bell choir. I don't like the bell. I'm getting out. Oh man, for a month,
I hate bell choirs.
for a month, Dave, I was sweating like I was in court, and like Jack Doyle would just point, and but I'm doing all of that to promote the mission of the church, you know, and I like what Aaron Bowen said. He said, I'll do anything short of sin to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And that's kind of my thought, you know.
it is all about the relationship. So my wife Leslie used to play in Jack's bell choir too. So
Oh, really?
then there, you two could compare notes.
We could. So,
Okay, so I have done a lot of talking over the last half an hour, and there's very little other material for me to go through, but I do want to have some conversation about what I've been talking about. A lot of it maybe doesn't feel like it applies to new ministry with children, but I hope you can see how a lot of it might apply to ministry with children. And just thinking in terms of helping people kind of move from one place to another in terms of their faith. So let's talk about it for a few minutes today. First, in terms of the churches that you're already serving in, and you could jump in on this too, you know, kind of the traditional church that you were appointed to. I'm going to share my screen again here. Does your existing church have a clear, simple plan for moving people in terms of their discipleship that everybody knows? So, Brett, you're saying no. So talk to us about that a little bit.
None of my appointments, especially the one I'm in now, have had a clear disciple making process. I started the work with one just before COVID hit. You know, we'd done some visioning, we'd worked out what our mission was, and then the world shut down and that got put on the back burner. You know, since I've been at Canton, we've had a couple of conversations about working to find or identify our vision and our mission, but that's as far as we've gotten to this point. You know, life happens, and you know, trying to juggle all the balls.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I would say no, not a clear plan. We have a gift that we give to visitors. When people come, we make them welcome, but there's not a lot of one-on-one invite them to come join us. The new people that we have this past year are friends of our new pastor, Pastor Kevin Kiddo, that came to support him initially, and they stuck. So there needs to be, and when you said next step after our Bible club, there needs to be. It can't just be, oh yeah, we had fun at school and that was it. It needs to be more than that. The reason that we're having fun at school, and the relationship needs to grow. We need to make the connections.
I think the relationship component really for me is the key. I've served many traditional churches that sponsored lovely things like AA or WIC or food pantry, but often they gave gifts anonymously to people. They were either the vendor that held a ministry or a community service thing, like Boy Scouts, but they weren't necessarily involved in making those key relationships. They were really separate organizations using the church for their appointed services. And I see churches give money to all sorts of ecumenical things, or write checks, or send food, or maybe donate, but if they stand behind a counter and it's a very brief exchange with a whole bunch of rules and regulations, and really connecting with people on personal ways, besides saying, have you used this food pantry in the last month, and here are the 2 boxes of cereal you're eligible for. It's always treating people as if they're a consumer of services, never sort of equal partners, and what we can both bless each other with in terms of our own humanity and our own spiritual journey. So, I think for A Little Child Will Lead Us, it really is a missional approach that says we partner together around an unmet need. But nobody's the expert. We're all learning together, and we don't assume to in any way shame people, or just say, you are the recipient of our packaged goods. I think that is the huge shift for me, even as someone who had social work experience. For too long, we have treated people as consumers and patients and clients. Even parishioners, in the attractional model, are consumer of goods and services.
Right.
And I think that's a huge shift. How do we humble ourselves to say, I'm no better than you. I'd like to hear about your experiences. Here is something I maybe have thought about or could offer for, just maybe being a little older than you and lived a little longer on this earth. But in no way do I come as some expert. And I think that authenticity, that humility, that willingness to be honest and open is key to authentic building of relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And, like I've had a couple of people say, you're like a normal person, Paul. I'm like, what do you mean? You're like, well, you're not like a pastor. I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? They're like, well, you talk and hang out with us like a normal person. I'm like, I am a normal person. They're like, but you're a pastor, right? So I think part of our challenges with work like this is we have to on some level undo harm, hurt, and bad. Like we have to undo bad Christianity. I don't know how else to say it. Absolutely. So we have a confirmation class. We only have 1 kid from Sydney. We have 6 kids, 4 from Mount Upton UMC, 1 is from Masonville Federated, and then we have 1 kid here. But I was showing them a video on circuit riders and how amazing it was. I mean, these young pastors, they'd show up at a farmstead and they would sleep in the farmer's hayloft and they would eat whatever the farmer had. And I mean, they were dependent on these people. They certainly didn't think they were better. And they'd start circuits and band meetings and have prayer groups and maybe oversee the physical construction of a church. And I mean, I saw a video the other day, I don't know how accurate it is, but the person said there's more United Methodist churches than post offices. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah. But so what I'm saying is, and I don't know how to say this without just saying it, but sometimes, I'll be at conference and somebody will have big robes on with chevrons, or as I like to call them, Tony the Tiger Stripes, and it's Reverend Doctor. And, honestly, I think education is a good thing and I respect it. I don't really care how many degrees you have. What I care about is, are you called? Do you love Jesus? And are you willing to do this work? You know what I mean? Because, I've seen local pastors that run circles around people that we have that have PhDs. And I don't say this as sort of an educational dig. What I'm saying is, from my understanding as Methodists historically, that's not the people we are. We're not the people that sit on our laurels yeah, I know I have my ordination certificates on my wall behind me, but I had to put them somewhere, Dave. But yeah, I mean, for me, when I graduated from seminary in 2014, my late grandpa, who only went through 8th grade, said, "You have more degrees than a thermometer, kid, and you're still stupid." That's what he said to me as a joke. Right. But the point is that, kind of elaborating on what Ann said, Jesus went to the people. And all of those people had something to offer. It's not like we were the Pez dispenser of religiosity, and the Reverend Ann Canfield's here, so now the children can sit around her and she can bestow upon them. I mean, I'm sure that Ann has a lot of wisdom. I've experienced it, and actually I'm interviewing on the same group with her at the board, so I will experience some of that wisdom, and she has a lot of it. But it's the idea that Jesus was not, as we all know, sitting among just the very wealthy. He said, I want to go down to the people. I want to see what's going on with the woman at the well. I want to talk to the lepers, because I was told that nobody's allowed to talk to them, but I bet they have something to offer, So the longer I'm in ministry, the more humbled I get. I think of the Apostle Paul. As he went on, he felt smaller and less significant, to the point where he said he's the chief of all sinners. So, I've only been a UMC pastor for 11 years, but when somebody compliments me, I guess it's not low self-esteem per se, but I don't think highly of myself. I think highly of Christ. And I feel blessed to be able to do this work. And, I guess that's what I would say. And I guess what I would say is, and maybe you'd agree or disagree, Ann and everybody else, people are over that high up reverend with the pointing finger. And I never liked that either when I was a kid. We went to the Baptist church for a while. Those people, no pun intended, scared the hell out of me. So I'd rather have church people that want to be part of me, not the church lady from Saturday Night Live. And I've used that, like somebody said something to be snarky once, and I sent them the video, and they opened it, and it was like, well, isn't that special? So I'm just over all of that. Like, what is it? Barbara Butler Bass calls it the frozen chosen. Like, I'm just over all of that stuff, in the sense that we all have something to offer. We all have made mistakes. We all can improve every day. Let's come together as the body of Christ,
Amen.
All right, my sermon's over. So
That's great. So with all of that in mind, in that sense that everybody we meet is on a journey, we're on with them. I think one of the things that I have thought about is, when you're planting a new faith community, it's an opportunity to make a simple pathway for people that maybe our existing churches can't figure out. We don't have enough, people, like Jenny said earlier, are very resistant sometimes to growing deeper. And so when we talk about being part of a small group, they've been in the church 30 years. They've never done that before. Why should I start now? There's a lot of resistance, I think, in the existing church to things like that, for some people, at least. And so the opportunity we have when we're starting a new faith community is to create it from the beginning. And that's why we teach this is, even if your existing church doesn't want to be part of going deeper, you can invite the new people, including the children and the young, their parents, to be part of a process that's simple, that maybe says, and again, it's about meeting needs too. Maybe the reason to have a small group that makes sense for young mothers is they are desperately in need of a chance to talk to another adult because their life is about their kids. And so, you invite them to be part of a small group as a next step of other mothers, so that and you provide childcare so that they can actually show up out of that strong sense of need for fellowship that you're talking about in relationship. And so I just hope that you will think about, how can you move your existing church in this direction, but also if you're starting something new, whether it's, at the school, or it's in your church, or it's out in nature, or it's, in this, this grouping of churches, Paul, as you continue to lead folks in a process, I hope you'll invite them to think about, their own discipleship
Yeah.
and how are they going deeper in their faith. And then how can we invite, as we do this new thing with children on, once a month or once a week or whatever we're going to do, how can we invite those people not just to have a great time together, to have lots of fun, but if they want to go deeper, what's the next step that we could invite them to? That's what we're encouraging you to think about. And maybe it's just 2 steps. Maybe it's this fun event, and then there's the small group program that you have.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some worship aspect within the small group.
And the great thing is that that's happening too, because we have I have a book study today at 4:30, which is in person and on Zoom. It's hybrid. But then at 6:15, a woman from Mount Upton is doing a study. And actually, I was part of it last week. I can't be part of it tonight, but there was somebody from the Oxford Foundation. So you're just, this is just the Pandora's box is opened, and this stuff is just flying all over. And I'm not even like in the center of all of it, but I don't need to be,
That's awesome.
But what I would say too is I was up really late last night talking to a friend of mine who's Anglo-Catholic, and there was a couple times he goes, you Protestants, and but one of the things he was saying, which I think holds water, is he goes, when I look at the history of reform movements, Anglo-Catholic, some Protestant movements, you all have been very effective at leading people to Christ. But what I think many movements are lacking is this deep spirituality, and I think what, in my mind, what started happening in the 1960s is civic religion. You're part of the Elks, you're part of the Moose, and you're also part of the church, and you go on Sunday, you pray, and maybe you wear white gloves and a Chiquita banana hat. I remember as a kid, I don't know, there was one older woman, I don't know what was on her head, a dead canary. I was just trying to listen to the pastor, and this thing was, so this like kind of pomp and splendor and big buildings and sort of ostentatious displays, which to me are not historically Methodist whatsoever. So it turned into this sort of societal collective thing that we do because we're good people, and good people go to church and then eat waffles afterwards. And I think that I agree with what Ann has said, is I still think Sunday worship is important, but we have to start being a religious community again. Right. And I think that some people go, I go to church on Sunday, because I've asked people, are you a Christian? I go to church on Sunday. Right. Oh, okay. Are you a Christian? I give to the church. So it's an institutional connection. What I'm more interested in is being with the people and spending time with people. And then as a secondary kind of, you could call it a next step, all of a sudden those relationships have formed. And now we have people coming into the life of the church, and we have a new guy joining our choir tonight too at Sydney. And it's all relationships, but so often it's like, well, how can we put every little piece of it in place? Well, I think we should have a plan, but then we should also be ready for the Holy Spirit to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and you weren't expecting it, but it's not step 5 exactly. So we have to tell the person no. So I think, we don't want to go like full blown Azusa Street necessarily. But I think we want to have a mixture where we have a plan, but at the same token, it's malleable enough to say, hey, something new has come up. And I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm rambling.
Can I just say one more thing? And I'm not going to speak again during this because I really want everybody else to speak. But there's, to me, only one thing we have to do well. And that is to love people as Jesus sees them and loves them. And one of the childcare workers said, I want to make a goal chart for the nursery room. We have 8 little kids under 3. And, for the one child with autism to make eye contact. And I said, well, that's great, but that's not a goal. We don't have goals like that here. Our only goal is to love this child as a masterpiece of God, is to just see their awesome, unique little self and just celebrate the wonder and beauty and that they are a masterpiece of God, and just to afford them with all that sacred worth and dignity and celebrate who this little being is, and just to be in awe that they're here and they're full of energy, and just to love them so unconditionally as Jesus loves them. So if we're going to do ministry with children, it's about that absolute profound love of Jesus, to love little children as Jesus told us to. And everything, and if you love children well, those parents are going to love you well, because few parents today hear what's wrong with their kid. I'm ADHD, I'm on this, I'm on that. I mean, all we hear is diagnoses and problems and what's wrong with you. We need to be all about what's right with you. You are God's masterpiece, and we have to just celebrate who people are. Because yes, we all have these weaknesses, we all have needs, but my goodness, we need to help people identify their sacred worth and the grace of God in them. That we have to be all about the love of Jesus with people.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's having a plan, having steps, but and I'll tell you, and I agree with you, because it's so Methodist. It's like we make a plan and we're like, well, we need a subcommittee, and right, so it's like, no, we don't need a subcommittee, no subcommittee. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to pray and see what God does. Well, how do we make a no? Stop being Methodist. Stop. No, I mean, I don't know. So from what I'm hearing Ann say is we need a plan, but not like a box. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Like, well, Aaron calls it guardrails, is what he calls it. So it's kind of ethereal sometimes, because it's like you have the plan, but things are still unfolding.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Ann? Like, that's kind of the way I feel. It's hard always to like put an
Right.
exact
I have
finger
a
in the pulse.
structure of how people can enter in this new faith community. They can do it through childcare, through the moms group, through separate church, through the advisory committee and the intergenerational activities, through coming to church itself. There's all these on and exit ways to come. But above all, since we're a new faith community about little kids and young families, it's just all about, loving them as humbly and uniquely as we can. And yes, there's always a strategy or a system, because people want to get to know you, and you have to be organized about what you have to offer. But again, people aren't, what I don't like when I see these pathway things, it's if, okay, I'm on step 3. I'm so far in my discipleship. I'm in class 301 now. I mean, I know it's probably not that way at all, but to someone new, it's like, well, no, I can't talk to you. I'll have coffee with you when you complete 402. It's just like, it's so, because then it's so institutionalized, right? I
It
get to
feels
meet
that way.
the bishop when I've gotten through my elders exams. It's like, give me a break. So that's what I think we just have to guard against, that it ever seems to be a trajectory of I'm worthy enough to interact with you when I get to point D. I mean, that is just crap. We're always worthy to interact, whenever, and to have a strategy and a system, but that works to serve people. It's not that people have to serve the system.
Right.
That's what we have to guard against.
And
Right.
remember, our tradition started as an insult. It's like, do you remember the Spice Girls, Scary Spice, Baby Spice? Methodist was not a positive
That's
thing.
right.
Like, I've joked with the church. You ever see that show Monk? The guy that washes his doorknobs? Unbelievable Methodist. Is he actually? I don't know. So like, if being methodical,
We love Monk.
is how we got our name, which is we want some of that, but we don't want all of that. You know what I mean? So if you don't pray exactly from 4 to 6 in the morning, like John Wesley, then we'll figure it out. It's so.
Well, thank you for the conversation. And yeah, I think you're all right on the right path. I think the idea is like Ann was saying, there is structure though. There's people know about her dinner church, that's a next step people can take, right? And if they want to, they can come to dinner church. And that's kind of a little bit deeper than just bringing their kids to the after school program.
Or
Because-
bring them to Sunday school. And we've had,
Right.
I've baptized 8 of these kids in the last 8 months, and I have one scheduled in a couple of weeks. So we'll have 10 children baptized that were completely unchurched people that I've known within this year.
Yeah.
And it's because they see the absolute, where else do their children get that type of celebration and love?
Beautiful.
They hear that God's behind all that celebration and love.
Yeah. So, Ann, clearly a next step for people that come through the doors in your childcare program, many of them have felt welcome to come to worship. How have you prepared your existing congregation to actually welcome them, or have you not worried about that?
I have, because I had, in a past church I served, and Dave was my DS then. Because of the older established church being such church lady type people, my strategy was to separate them and serve them all separately, have a traditional service, a contemporary service. And I think the resistance to start that contemporary service was always like, well, it's going to fail. If they can't support themselves in 6 months, we're shutting it down. And when that service grew to over 100 people and became 3 times larger than the traditional service, plus I had chapel service, talk about trying to be all things to all people. Good way to burn out. But beyond that, when those people started having more power and they considered it their church and they wanted equal, if not more, representation on church councils, because there were more of them and they were contributing literally 3 times what the older people were giving, all hell broke loose, because it was like, no, this is our church. We can't let those people, those young people, take over. And they defied the stereotypes that young people, oh, they're not going to want to get involved. They're not going to want to be in it. They're not going to want to do that. And they did want to do those things because they loved this church that was nurturing their kids. So I have intentionally said, although we have a separate church, it really is a glorified small group. The church service needs to be the integrated way. And I have not been successful at making it less traditional. And, my young people who come, they come for their kids and they rotate through with Sunday school, but they don't think much of the church service. It's very traditional with doxology and this and that and 3 traditional hymns. We just put a screen up, recently, because God forbid we should look like a movie theater. So it is hard. And these are the nuts and bolts where, but this older church is probably going to die out within 10 years at the very most, because of the age. The average age of people are in their 80s. So fortunately, my young people just have sympathy. They're like, it's just like, they're such sweet old people, but you still have that real tension of people holding on to a past. But I think my old people have fallen in love with little kids being in church again. And they are much more gracious than the older people at a former church. Much more gracious about
Oh, I'm glad to hear
it's
that.
hard. It's hard. Because it's people, young people do not know the purpose of a doxology, or or they just don't get the whole thing. And it's a strange foreign land, so it's not easy. I'm waiting for you to write a book on that, Dave. So.
Well,
So
go ahead.
I've let it go long enough. I can't let Paul and Ann just completely dump on high church, strong liturgical worship.
Please offer another perspective, my friend.
I am going to offer another perspective. It's really all about education. And you say kids don't know what a doxology is, so let's teach them. Let's teach them that it's our way of saying thank you, God, for everything that you've given us. And here's our gift back to you, us. Why do we stand up to sing hymns? Why do some of us stand up for the gospel reading? You know, what do the robes mean? What do the vestments mean? You know, how can parament colors help us tell time? You know, two local pastors that came out of one of my churches, I tried so hard to teach them about liturgical colors, and right now they're using purple. And I've got green and white out because one, I was being a little lazy and didn't want to take the white off. But I explained this is why we have both colors. And we don't have very many children right now actively coming to worship that aren't above 14 months. So I use children's time as a question and answer time. What questions do you have about church? And sometimes they'll stump me. Sometimes I turn that question into a mini sermon and we have fun with it. So high church liturgical worship can be good and can be something that people find comforting.
Mhm.
That being said, contemporary worship is also liturgical because there's generally a set pattern. So just because you're not doing traditional liturgy doesn't mean you're not doing liturgy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. What I was talking about is the way we treat people, the way people are regarded, and maybe the power and authority that a clergy person lords over somebody else. That could happen in a contemporary service as well. So I wasn't necessarily speaking just to the type of worship. I was speaking to the characterization of the people and sometimes the clergy that abuse their authority. So sorry if you misheard that. We have paraments. I wore a robe this past Sunday. You'd be proud. So.
No, and I know, Brett, that you have such a love of a higher church, and I think that's wonderful. I think people should go to a church that loves that. I'm just clear that I have never liked that. I have always been like once some old lady said to me, "Why don't you wear your costume?" She meant my robe, and I said, "Because I don't want you to think I'm in a costume." And and I'm sure if it really mattered to me, I think I would spend more time, but it just simply doesn't. And that is me. I own it. I'm just not into people parading in, like just bring the pony in, or I hate that. And that's all about me and my dislikes. And I own that. I think it's cool that you love all of that. I just disdain it. It's just about me and my likes. So I know that. I own it.
And I still love you, Anne. And Paul, to kind of touch back on that, lording over the power and authority thing, I think it's an indictment on us that we need to get our hands dirty. We need to be in the trenches. It, as Paul said, being all things to all people, but engaging with those that we're trying to reach. I think back a few years ago at camp, and I'm sure both of you, Paul and Ann, have read this in my papers about how I had a staff member at Casawasco say, "You're the first pastor I've seen actually play with the kids." What is that saying about the chaplains that are going to do their week? They're seeing it as vacation, or what's going on with that? Why aren't we there engaging with the kids? And I think that breaks down some of those barriers that you were talking about, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, like an example I would think of is Pope Francis. I don't know how the Pope, I call it the bread box. It's the Pope Mobile. So when he got elected to the papacy, he had like a Ford and he's out among the people. I mean, so it's like, imagine you have on all the vestments and all the finery, but even the most small child goes, that person's approachable and I can give them a hug. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I just hope that that clergy person isn't in such a position of power. I mean, I talk to people because I was baptized Roman Catholic. A lot of my family's Roman Catholic. And my dad went to Catholic school. He talks more about being afraid than being loved. You know, like the priest walked in, he was scared, you know, and you know, imagine a Catholic priest that has on all the vestments, but even a 2-year-old child runs up and is so comfortable. If that can be done, amen. But I think what I'm trying to say is, and maybe Ann would agree, is that's where the ball's been dropped, I think, a lot. So
Yeah, it is all about relationships. That's for sure. So thank you all very much for the conversation. And I wanted just to spend 2 minutes on this concept. We've kind of already been talking about it a little bit. You know, what might a simple process be like for kids and their families? And it might be something like, you know, what Anne has described she's doing. You know, there's a very clear, like Emily was talking about last week, the meeting of a need first, right? That's where you meet people. That's how you connect with people in the community. Is there's a very clear need because you have listened, you know what it is. And in many of our communities, there is these childcare deserts, and that might be a primary need that we're trying to focus on. That's what brings people into relationship with us. But then there are some other things that they might be invited to, maybe this monthly dinner church that has some aspects of worship, or maybe it's getting together to do crafts, you know, in kind of the same mode that Jenny's talking about at the school. There's, you know, there's some kind of a Bible story, and there's crafts, and there's snacks, and there's, you know, there's fun that happens around thinking about God to invite people to. And then after that, there might be a place, especially for the adults that you're connecting with, to connect in a small group for support. And that we might think in terms of people actually finding the doorway into this in multiple ways. So I hope that you might imagine something like this in your ministries with children, that it's enough just to love on people. It's enough for them just to come and have their children in childcare, or just to come and do a craft, that's enough. But there's always an opportunity for people to go deeper in their faith, and then to make the decision, like Anne was talking about, is a part of our new faith community step to invite people to come to Sunday morning worship in our traditional churches, or do we want to actually steer people away from that? I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. Will the church people do more harm, like Anne was describing happened in her former appointment? Will they do more harm than good? Or can they be hospitable, and can they experience the grace of God in the presence of children? Those are calls that we have to make as leaders. Or do we actually create something else for people to come to that kind of want to make a next step? So that's all just very simple concepts for inviting people, kind of what's next. And any comments to that?
Yeah, well, Dave, just, you know, and again, Brett, you help me with this, because maybe I'm missing something here. And I'm weird. I'm like, please hear, I'm 36 years into this. So to me, worship became just a production. You got to deal with the choir. You got to deal with this. You got to deal with stroking everybody's egos, and everybody their floor time and their part, and the choir, you know, all that thing. And I think that's what, to me, I try to protect, because it's intimidating and people feel like a spectator, is to come to a production. So if we could have authentic worship, and clearly, Brett, you're right, it could be in a traditional form. But in too many churches that I have served, worship was just this grand production of, choirs, bell choirs, praise bands, whatever, the children's moment, this and that. And it just became this grand production in which people who did come often didn't come back, because it was the most lonely, overwhelming thing of just seeing one act after another act, after another act, after another element. And the ability to be seen, heard, remembered, lucky enough that somebody shook your hand. There's so many risks, to me, involved in the grand worship service. And that's what I think, eats at me, is like, can we safeguard that that person will feel comfortable, will not be overwhelmed when we have all these, and, again, I had, larger services at a former church where I was looking at about 200 people on a Sunday morning. You were ushering people in and out, but the whole morning just felt to me like I was the program director of a production. It was one production after another.
Yeah.
And that's what it just became, orchestrated. I literally had older people say to me in the contemporary worship, do they have to pray? They're staying too long. They're taking up parking, and it's like, do those young people need to pray? And I would reach a point of,
Wow.
why are we doing this? This is just shuffling people in and out of multiple worship services.
And the service better be an hour in, not 105.
Right,
An
and it's
hour.
all
An
this
hour.
production of the videos, making sure they match the song, and are the praise songs emotional enough to zap at your heart? And it just was like, oh, sweet Jesus, who has time? Life is too short to make sure that there's some sappy hymn that just cuts emotionally to our guilt and shame and our collective horror. It was like, I can't take it myself. So maybe we need Brett to come in here and be our hero with all of this. But I just don't overwhelm people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Don't risk putting people someplace that is so overwhelming or foreign that they're just like a stranger in an experience. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I said, kind of in the beginning of this Launchpad process, it's okay to think of having an entire system for people to kind of grow in their faith and become disciples of Jesus that's separate from the traditional church that you're serving. As a leader, you might make that decision because the people and the experience that Ann's describing well enough to know the folks in the traditional service are not going to welcome these people the way I want them to feel welcome. They're not going to feel like this is speaking to them because it's language that speaks to a different generation. So we're going to create an experience for them, a worshipful experience that is not traditional, and they can experience everything that they need to grow in their faith in our new faith community without plugging into Sunday morning worship. I just want you to know that that's an okay option. You might choose, because the folks in your existing church are ready to welcome them. You might choose to do it the way that Ann has in Watertown and invite people to have the baptism and things, and hopefully become part of that worshiping community. But you might choose not to do that too.
Our monthly sauce and cross ministry here at Sydney, it's just a basic pasta dinner, salad, desserts, and then we go up and have I would say it's a blended worship, contemporary. Some of it's contemporary, some of it's traditional. We have a guitar, but we get 30, 40 people in that service, and many of them are either not Sunday morning people. Most of them certainly don't go to Sydney. Some of them don't go to any church. But what we have, what's developed as part of this service is a testimonial. I preached last Thursday on work-life balance, And one of them actually laughed at me. I said, "This is aspirational, folks." Right. But then I invite people to give testimonies, and and sometimes in this service, people really pour their heart out. They go, Pastor, I'm tired. I'm tired. We had a single mother, and she just said, I just work and work and work. And you talk about work-life balance and finding rest, and Jesus took naps, but I'm just tired, and then maybe that's where the work we're doing here will help with that,
So that might be the service that if you do start something new, that might be the service that you invite people to be part of, maybe, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And yeah.
Very cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for the conversation. Again, we're just 3 weeks away now from session 6, when you all will be on and you'll be asked to kind of lay out your timeline. And Paul, I hear you saying it's going to be really hard for you to do this because of the process you're leading your folks through. You're trying to let it unfold through the process, not because of any planning that you do for a 6-month plan or something. That's what I hear you clear. So we're just going to ask you to do your best of picturing what the next 6 months might look like.
Yeah. So what I'll do is in my meeting on the 18th, I mean, to me, this is sort of like a subset or a piece. So I think on some level, this is being presented as a standalone new faith community. And what I would say is we could do this, but it might have other components.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this on the 18th to my team and just say, this could be the next thing. So we have the VBS. We have Claudia Jenkins does winter VBS. How can we better integrate this so that we're engaging these people more often and not, so there's a lot of ministries cropping up. How do we connect the dots like a spider web? And that's what I'm thinking that this could do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The other concept you might share there that I haven't emphasized a lot here is the concept of a group of churches like this actually doing lots of experiments, right? That's the culture you want to create, is these people together might over the next 5 years do 3 or 4 new things, right? That's what you're trying to grow in them, is this concept. Oh, let's try some things. A dinner church, let's do a theater kind of a thing. Let's do and there'll be people that'll get excited about those things, and so you're not having to do the work. They're gonna, like you were saying, they're gonna take it and run with it and find their team from among everybody, and you're gonna support the whole thing. I think you could talk about a 6-month plan that would actually birth multiple things.
Yeah. I think we're on the cusp of that. And I think when you and Ann invited me to this, it was kind of God's timing, because we spent a year just learning, going through the SLI stuff, spending the hours getting to know each other. So we're at the implementation phase now, and we just started that, I don't know, a couple months ago. So we're at the infancy of that. So we spent the year sort of, doing the relationship building.
Yeah, that's great. That's great stuff. So here's your homework. Again, we will not be together next Tuesday. It'll be 2 weeks from now that we'll be together. And your homework is to, think about or share in your group what helped you to grow in your own discipleship. And this is around that L3 concept of going deeper and loving each other, is actually share within your group. And Brett, you may not have your group yet, but write a note that when you gather your group, this is a great thing to talk about together. Why are you a follower of Jesus? Who helped you to grow into that relationship with Jesus? And just let the group, everybody around the table, share their own personal faith story of why they're here. And that can be a really significant deepening of relationships with each other, but it also helps people to think about, okay, that kind of a person helped me. How can I be that kind of a person for these new people we're going to meet? And then think together, if you were going to create a simple disciple-making pathway that might look, something like that, or even more simple than that, what might you start with? What might it look like? And then if you can build a visual pathway to share at our next meeting, that's what we'll do in 2 weeks together. Okay. Everybody okay? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I have been totally oblivious to the chat, guys. I just haven't even looked at it till right now. Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul, that I did not read any of these things till right now.
Well, the important one, not the ones having fun with Brett, those were a while ago, but just the PowerPoints. So I don't know if any of you, I know you are, Dave, Basecamp. So the L3 model, loving, learning, leading, Aaron Bounds will put you on this website. Everything has these funny terms: vital signs, Basecamp, Launchpad. We can't just, everything has to sound like Starlink from Elon Musk. But so we have all of that, and we have our documents, we have our covenant. So if I could just put all those PowerPoints on and say, hey, folks, check this out.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
I'd be happy to share those and the links to the videos too, Paul. You can
Cool.
give to people and just
Yeah.
invite them to check them out. Yeah, I'll be happy to send. I've been sending them out every week, but you're asking me to put all 4 PowerPoints on one email. Is that right?
If or I could go fishing, but yeah, if you don't mind.
It only takes me a minute to do that. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, friends. And I hope you all have a great week and that you continue to experience God's grace in the midst of this season of the year. And that God continues to put dreams and visions in your head, and that you will find the people that God wants to come alongside you to help this thing come about. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Dave. This is very helpful.
I'm glad.
Thank you.
God bless, friends.
God bless you
Take
too.
care.